in our historical series debate, November 5, 1990. Resolved, the South had every right to secede from the Union. On the affirmative, we have James Paul Deavy and E.E. Fletch. And on the negative, we have Amy C. Fletch and Thomas Dealey, Esquire. Let the debate begin.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds that unite them with another, you will recognize these words as belonging to the Declaration of Independence. Our forefathers fought in the War for Independence for the right to have a say in the laws that would govern them. This desire was so strong in some, they were willing to die for it. There are striking similarities between the War for Independence and the Civil War. The Civil War expresses the desire in the South to have a say in the laws they would follow and live by. Some would say the South had a say, but a closer look reveals a different picture. The colonists, after the War for Independence, set up a system that offered a balance of power in the Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court, so all would have a say in the laws that would govern them. They built a House of Representatives and a Senate that would represent all of the colonists equally. The House was based on population, and the Senate was comprised of 2 representatives for each state. As time wore on, the northern states gained a larger population, which gave the northern states more votes and control in the House of Representatives. But the Senate was still divided equally between northern and southern interests. The North already controlled the House, and as Maine proposed to become a free state, the balance of power in the Senate threatened to be upset. Missouri was then allowed to be a slave state to maintain the delicate balance. However, it became obvious to the South that this balance would not last. With the election of Abraham Lincoln, it became evident that separation was the only Southern choice. So as spoken by Thomas Paine in a Revolutionary War pamphlet entitled Common Sense, 'tis time to part.
Hello, my name is Thomas Dealey. I will be showing you some maps that I'll be explaining some maps to that I will be referring to later on. This map here is a map of 1820 from the Missouri Compromise. These yellow states are slave states, the red are free states, and the black is states that the decision is left themselves. The brown state right here is Spanish territory. This is a map of 1850, and again, the yellow states are slave, the red states are free, and the blue state is decision left to themselves. Now, this one, Spanish are most of it, and here, after the Mexican War, we got in California, Utah, New Mexico, Texas, and Indiana. And over here is a map of the Civil War of the United States, and underneath this red line is all of the South, all the black is South. Above all the blue is the North, and all of the brown is territories. When our founding fathers formed the Constitution, they called slavery a sleeping serpent lying under the table, and they tried to solve the problem through compromise from the earliest days. For example, the Missouri Compromise of 1820 stated that in order to balance power between the North and South, Maine would be admitted as a free state, and Missouri as a slave state. It also stated that any new state admitted above the 36th 30 north would be free. Any state admitted below that would be slave. After the Mexican-American War, we added new territories: New Mexico, California, Utah, and Texas. When our founding, wrong one. And to decide if they would be slave or free. Again, North tried to compromise by allowing states to choose for themselves if they would be slave or free. But South tried to take advantage and put hundreds of people in Kansas to vote slaves. But North found out and had a great battle, and that's why they call it being Kansas. And the North has always tried to compromise and not abolish slavery. Thank you.
I believe the reason that the North won was because they had more men in supply. They didn't win because they were right. They just had more equipment. Another reason the North won is because Ulysses S. Grant wouldn't let any food or supplies get to these men. The reason they surrendered is because his men were dying of hunger. Sometimes they didn't even have blankets or shoes. In fact, in 1860, this is what the Union and Confederacy supplies were. The population in the North, there was 20,275,000. In the South, there was 5,449,000. And on the borderline, there was 1,983,000. The manufacturing establishments in the North, there was 1,100. And in the South, there was 1,800. The value of firearms manufactured in the North, there was 2,002,070. And in the South, there was only $7,300. The locomotives manufactured in the North, there was 451. In the South, there was only 19. The railroad mileage in the North, there was 21,973. In the South, there was 9,283. That meant the North could transport more supplies faster and to more areas, ensuring that their men were always equipped. Even though the South wasn't supplied very well, they fought 100% harder. Their spirits were higher, and they knew if they lost the war, they would lose their whole way of life. The Southern generals were twice as good. Also, with Lee graduating first in his class and Grant fourth, sometimes the North would lose twice as many men, for the South fought much harder. Another thing was Lee. Lee's father, Light Horse Harry Lee, fought under George Washington in the Revolutionary War for his country's independence and states' rights. Robert E. Lee fought for his states' rights also, and when Lincoln asked him to command the entire Union Army, he kindly declined, saying first his state, then his country. Thank you.
What do you think of when you hear of the Civil War? My name is Amy Fletch, and until I researched it and learned the real main reason, I thought it was slavery. But slavery played only a small part of which didn't actually come about until after the war started. I am here to tell you about those actual reasons now. The South did not want anyone to control them. They wanted to rule themselves, so they rebelled. This is why they were nicknamed the rebels. Even though the root of the problem was the rebellious South, there were four main reasons that started the Civil War. All those I will discuss with you. Look at my chart. You will see that the first point is the question of what is more important, a state or a nation. I think that history has proven itself that a nation is much better and stronger than any state. I think that our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, summed it up when he said, quote, "The nation is stronger than any state. The nation is indivisible to others. We are the only ones who can destroy it or keep it together. So President Lincoln's only hope was to keep the nation together. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860, he assured the South that he would respect slavery and state rights where it existed. But that was not good enough for the South, and so in 1860, South Carolina seceded from the Union. Now my second point is the clash of cultures. Whenever two cultures come together, one of two things will happen. Either they combine or one overwhelms the other. For example, in the case of the American Indians and the early settlers, their cultures were completely different. The Indians had no concept of owning land. They used it, but it was not owned. As for the settlers, they came to America for this very reason, to get and own land. So their cultures clashed and the white man's culture swallowed the Indians. Well, the same sort of thing happened with the North and South. The North had 7 times as much manufacturing, a more efficient, larger railroad system. They were highly educated and much more civilized. The South was still the old-fashioned southern plantations where not even half of the Southerners were educated. I think the character Rhett Butler from the famous book Gone with the Wind says it best when he says, "All the South has is cotton, slaves, and arrogance." So in any case, there will only be one culture left standing, and that is the one who is the strongest, has the most spirit, and wholeheartedly believes in what they are fighting for. In this case, that was the North. The third thing is political power. The South thought that by having slaves, that would ensure the Confederacy more political power. Because, as my next chart shows, slaves gave the South more people, and with more people you could have more representatives in the House. And with more representatives, you will have more votes, and with more votes, you will have more power. So see, the South didn't want the slaves thought of as individuals when tax time came along, but when this issue came about, they decided the blacks were 3/4 of a person. So the South was very manipulating when it came to the slaves. Now the fourth and final reason did not come to light until after the war, and that was the inhumanity of slavery. There were 2 people who played a big part in bringing this issue to light. They were a black man, Frederick Douglass, who bought his freedom, and an author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, whose book Uncle Tom's Cabin brought the horror and inhumanity of slavery to the eyes of many people. Frederick Douglass wrote a biography dictating his life as a slave. I would now like to read you a portion of this tell-all book in which he describes how his and many other slaves how him and many other masters treated their slaves. I have had 2 masters. My first master's name was Anthony. I do not remember his first name. He was generally called Captain Anthony, a title which I presume he acquired by sailing a craft on the Chesapeake Bay. He was not considered a rich slaveholder. He owned 2 or 3 farms and about 30 slaves. His farms and slaves were under the care of an overseer. The overseer's name was Plummer. Mr. Plummer was a miserable drunkard, a profane swearer, and a savage monster. He always went around with a cowskin and a heavy cudgel. I have known him to cut and slash the woman's head so horribly that even the masters himself would enrage at his cruelty, and would threaten to whip him if he did not mind himself. Master, however, was not a human slaveholder. It required extraordinary barbarity on the part of an overseer to affect him. He was a cruel man, hardened by a long life of slaveholding. He would at times seem to take great pleasure in whipping a slave. I have often been awakened at the dawn of day by the most heart-rending shrieks of an old aunt of mine, whom he used to tie up to a joist and whip upon her naked back till she was literally covered with blood. No words, no tears, no prayers from her gory victim seemed to move his iron heart from its bloody purpose. The louder she screamed, the harder he whipped, and where the blood ran fastest, there he whipped longest. He would whip her to make her scream and whip her to make her hush, and not until overcome by fatigue would he cease to swing the blood-clotted cowskin. I remember the first time I ever witnessed this horrible expedition. I was quite a child, but I well remember it. I never shall forget it, lest I remember anything. It was the first of a long series of such outrages of which I was doomed to be a witness and a participant. It struck me with awful force. It was the blood-stained gate, the entrance to the hell of slavery, through which I was about to pass. It was a most terrible spectacle. I wish I could commit to paper the feelings with which I beheld it. Even the Southerner, Robert E. Lee, who led the Confederacy, said, "Slavery is morally and politically evil." So, as you see, Lee did not believe in what he fought for, and that is one reason the South crumbled. The South wanted the slaves not only to labor the farms, but also for political reasons. Also, the Confederacy wanted to keep the blacks uncivilized because they were afraid the blacks would rebel, leaving the white man to become a slave himself. In conclusion, the rebellious South obviously started the war, but the patriotic North ended it. If the South had treated the blacks with respect and equality and had accepted authority, this war might not have begun. And as my closing statement, I would just like to quote General Grant when he said, "Why were the Southerners willing to wreck the Union their grandfathers had put together with so much love and labor?" Thank you. In the rebuttal, I would just like to address four major points our opponents have brought up. Now, the first point was that the North was trying to take state rights away, but that is not what the North was trying to do. The North was really trying to build a better and stronger nation that would stand a longer time. Point two was that Emily mentioned that Lee graduated first in his class and Grant only fourth. But does this really matter? I mean, Abraham Lincoln had very little schooling, and he became one of the greatest men in history. So I don't see how that was really a very good point there. Point three, they also mentioned about no supplies of food. That is the most logical thing to do in a war, is to take your supplies away so that the enemy will fall. And by doing that, they actually saved a lot of Southern and Northern lives by ending the war right then, instead of having it drag on for over a couple of months or whatever. Point four is, even though our nation was founded on states' rights, there were only 13 small colonies at the time. By the time of the Civil War, the country had grown from 13 scattered colonies, along the eastern seaboard to a mighty nation that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Now, this new nation needed a strong federal government. So those are just my little points that I got from your speech.
Okay, there are three things I would like to address specifically with what my opponents brought up. One, in saying that the Southerners were just a bunch of rebels, is not quite true, because they were just trying to protect their say in what the laws would turn out to be, so the North didn't control everything. And to lose their say in the vote meant that they lost, their way of life. They didn't have anything. They didn't have anything that was worthwhile to them. Everything was based on what the North wanted. Another thing was what you brought up about how the North fought much harder in what their cause was, and the South didn't. Just looking at the statistics in Emily's chart on the population, you should have crushed the South within a week. Why then did it drag on 4 years if we didn't believe in our cause? And another thing was, why abolish slavery? Why don't you get police to eliminate the slave beatings? Because slaves over here are much better off than in their native country, and we treat in the South our slaves like employees. With an employee, you would pay them money for their labor. With the slaves, we provided their food, shelter, and clothing in return for their labor.
And beatings.
And that is why I brought up the point of eliminate the beatings, not abolishing slaves.
Can we do a second rebuttal, please?
Yeah, please. We could make into Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
The points now. We just want to hear what
Will
somebody...
that affect our...
No.
The little whining baby over there.
No, that is not a way.
That's what he is doing. But is that going to affect our scores?
Okay,
Please.
All right, now let Jim talk.
slavery to run the different cotton fields. After all, the South has been nicknamed at times the Cotton Kingdom. We are so far away from the northern manufacturers who make all of the equipment to electronically pick up all the cotton. How would we pick up all the cotton? How would we pick all the cotton? Well, there's no way without slaves. And no cotton means no, your businesses up in the north would have no cotton to spin, meaning they would go out of business, meaning you would lose some of your economy. Also, there would be a cut off in clothing manufacture. It wouldn't also affect just the U.S. North and South. It would also affect the different European countries, including France. And
Well, I thought you said I couldn't interrupt them.
Yes, you can.
Hey,
Okay.
man, you'll be
Well,
wrong.
then the North gave the South the cotton gin that Eli Whitney invented to help them do their cotton. But instead of using that as a tool, they just decided, well, we need more slaves so that we can be producing more cotton.
No.
They got greedy. They did not use their tools as we have given it to them.
the cotton
We do
gin-
not
Yes,
need
that is.
We do not need that. But we need cotton, but we do not need that mass of cotton. We have other things that we can use.
the cotton gin, in order for the cotton gin to work properly, you needed slaves to pick the cotton.
You didn't
to
need
put
slaves.
through the cotton
How about
gin.
kids some white
So we can do
Well, then why don't we
more
have slaves
cotton.
now? And we have plenty of cotton clothing.
This is also 20th century.
So
This
what?
is not the 1800s.
If we would have
anymore.
kept on
There
with the
is a
1800s.
I would just like to say now that I'm at a point where I am debating the issue of the Civil War, and the things that I am stating are not all of my personal beliefs, and I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that clearly. This is at a standpoint of debating a subject on which we thought would be a fun thing to do. Any questions?
I would like to know why you think General Lee chose to defend the South when he obviously had strong Christian convictions.
because he was fighting for his state's rights.
Okay, but what about the issue of when it says in the Bible that all men are created equal? That includes blacks and any other one. So why can you use, just someone who's a different color than you for your slave when you're little?
Why don't you use your own brother?
Any more questions?
Well, you didn't let me finish what I had to say about Lee, which is something I would like to finish now. You got harped on Lee about you made it sound like a hypocrite for saying he hates slavery, and then you said that was the reason the South crumbled. If Lee was
one of the reasons.
Lee was a strong Christian just from the books, much more than Grant, and if he must have felt that the Lord wanted him to do that, and if the Lord didn't want him to do that, then I'm sure he would have understood that. So I don't see where you can get on Lee about what he did.
I am
And
just
also,
quoting his words.
Lee felt in his heart that states' rights were better, were more efficient over an entire nation, because it's just common sense knowing that if you have a whole nation with one capital trying to figure out what all the people's needs are, it would be easier to break it up into smaller sections where each state or smaller piece could.
And we're doing that. We have a governor, And then we have a state, a nation, a much stronger and better nation
They
in
would
case
go-
there is any kind of
And answer this.
Yeah,
war
but
or
that
If
was
we had a large war, then with another full country that didn't have each little state. Think if they came in with a full country of people,
And they
we
took
have
over
these
state
little
by
dinky
state by
states.
How are you going to do that? They'd crush us. So a nation who is together and has different authorities,
And the House divided against
it's like with
itself.
us. I stand for a state and mom and dad stand for the government. I have a certain amount of authority, the government has a certain amount of authority. So you have
It's
your
like
different
you're at a
things.
standpoint now of present time. You have to think in past time they didn't have governors who did this.
But they also
but they
developed
had
them.
the House of Representatives and they had the Senate with for each state they had 2 representatives who came and told what those states wanted. But as the North grew in size, 23 states opposed to 11, the North had a larger amount of representatives, meaning their wants were overruled, were engulfed the South, and for their
But we're not
20
talking about
their
engulfing our country.
23
We
states,
are
they
talking
have-
about trying
they
to
have a
establish a
population
government
of
and trying to
20
what is stronger and what is better. We're not talking about what is going to swallow what culture up. We're talking about what is better for the whole nation. You're saying that if we'd have more people in the House of Representatives, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what is better if we get attacked from some other country. What is going to be better, these little states that are going like this or one big nation that can fight for itself?
And
we seem to survive pretty good in the Revolutionary War against England.
and
We won our independence.
and as you saw, you wanted to break off and go off into the ocean by yourself. Well, yeah, that's what you guys did. You want to break off, but see, a house divided against itself cannot stand.
What our point was, then you would have to bring that and say that it was wrong for the Pilgrims to secede from the English because that would be a house.
The Pilgrims did not
divided
secede from the English.
against-
They moved.
They didn't
The
believe.
Pilgrims were slaves of the English.
They didn't believe that. They didn't believe.
We
in
were
what
not
the
telling.
South
We were not telling the
wanted.
South that they had to do this and this. England is
I
fine.
know
They had
I know
had no religious rights. They had nothing.
I
That
know-
is why we came here, and that is why the
And if
blacks
they
should
had
have
religious
freedom,
rights, they
because
would
that
be
is the
put in
reason we
prison.
came here.
I know you weren't deliberately forcing us, but with your overpopulation, what you wanted was expressed more. So what we were basically ruled by you, and we didn't want that. We felt each state should do what their people want. So seceding, we had every right to secede from you to form our own government.
And how
Just
much?
like the Pilgrims seceded from the English.
They didn't secede from England.
And
How did they do?
They moved.
They
from
were part of
country
England.
to country.
Okay,
They
let's go
seceded.
to another question, panel. In terms of slavery, you brought up that the slaves were treated as employees, and the North did not feel that that was really the case. And I would like to know a little bit more about your opinion concerning slavery. We'll start with you, Emily.
Well, it wasn't actually slavery to some people. You see, the North wanted lots and lots of cotton, and so one family cannot take care of a whole field of cotton. So they asked from the blacks from Africa to send some over to their state so they could help them.
They did not do that. They went over, they stole them from their houses, their entire country,
Their
took them over on
families, and took them
boats,
over.
and made them work and hit them with whips. That's what they did.
Yeah, but some of them didn't. Most of them didn't.
I read a
Well,
book that said
90%.
10% of of the owners treated theirs with respect.
Yeah, but
90%
Just like Frederick
treated them like crud.
No, 90%
Just like
treated them
Frederick Douglass.
nicely, and 10% treated them
No,
badly.
Emily, that is not true.
And so, why would they want to fight against themselves? They are trying to just ruin their way of life, and they're just trying to make other lives miserable. See if they want cotton from us, and so we cannot give them cotton unless we have some slaves, because it's harder to run a whole field with only one family. But if you have some helpers, then you can do that. And we also grew tobacco, and they wanted tobacco, and so they.
Who did? Who wants tobacco?
The men. And so they would buy tobacco from us. So we had to grow those two things. And not only one family can take care of all those things.
Okay, my answer to that question is, if you are employed at a job, you are not beaten, you are not bought. You have freedom of choice whether you want to work there or not. You are not beaten if you do something wrong or just for the heck of it. You do not have to work. You do not have to work from dawn till dusk. You are paid efficiently for your work, and it is.
You're not kept there.
Yeah, you're not kept there, and you have freedom of what you're gonna do.
Yeah, but we provided them clothing, shelter, and food and stuff like that.
The food that the pigs didn't eat.
It was the food that the pigs didn't eat that got the slaves.
No, some people gave them
10% of the people.
90% of the people gave them.
You have your statistics wrong here. 10% of the people gave them decent food.
What is your point in abolishing slavery when you think your point? You seem to be hold on. You seem to be focusing more on the way we treated our slaves. What is the problem with eliminating slave beatings and the way previous slaves have been treated? What is the problem?
Because you cannot take that many things and try to.
You can't
It's
go.
like with child abuse.
Go,
The
okay,
government
let's
cannot.
get along
The
now.
government cannot take control of the people who are abusing their children. Otherwise, there would be no child abuse. That's the same thing with slaves. They couldn't overtake that many. And anyway, the slaves deserved freedom. They didn't deserve to be. They didn't deserve to have to do things. They deserved the freedom of choice and freedom of religion and freedom, because that is what this whole nation is built on. Freedom. That is why they came here in the beginning.
We were.
Okay, do you all feel that you were able to express your opinions to your heart's content?
Yep.
Did you want to ask any questions?
I just had one little question. When the blacks who fought in the war, were they made to fight in it for the South, or were they volunteers?
No,
They
fought
were
for
volunteers.
North. They fought for North. North ordered the South to free their slaves, and after they were set free, then the slaves went up to North to fight against the South.
So all the slaves were set free then, or what?
Not all of them.
No.
Only the ones that they could get set free.
Okay, and what about the ones that were remaining?
The ones that were remaining,
Still got abused.
still, they fought for the Southerners, and their masters also fought.
No,
And so they
didn't.
both fought,
But what?
and so they could have more people.
We don't know
to
the
fight for
exact
country.
reason if they were forced or not, but it's only common sense that you would fight
How-
for freedom and not for
Okay,
keeping
yeah, I'll
your-
fight for you. I want to be your slave and be whipped.
What?
Stop it.
Is
that all?
Do you know any information concerning that, concerning the blacks being part of the Johnny Reb War? Side of the war. Okay.
Well,
Do you have an opinion there? Or?
No.
But do you want to express your...
no, I don't want to.
Okay.
Are we turned off?
Where's he going?
You did the drink it to the bathroom, one or the other.
And she did that look good because the only thing I was watching was
Good morning, America!
Let's go. I know. Keep on going.
Good morning, America. Good morning, America.
I'm Robert McLean, Sam. I'm Rose.
No, Mickey's shoes on.
Yeah, can we put in the toys?
I need that. Actually, here. Vicky, now we're gonna make
We'll build it a little further out.
see, all nice scarlet flannel, and a gay little petticoat and long stockings, oh, so warm.
Alex, please move.
Phoebe and I nearly died laughing when I put this rig on, but I like it ever so much. The dress is so comfortable and doesn't need any belt or sash, and I can sit without rumpling any trimming it. It's such a comfort. That's such a comfort. See, before, everything was so fancy and all that she had to be careful when she even sat. I like to be tidy, and so, when I wear fussed up things, I'm thinking of my clothes all the time, and that's tiresome. Do say you like it. I resolved I would just to please Uncle, for he does know much more about health than anyone else, I'm sure, and I'd wear a bag if he asked me to do it. I don't ask that, Rose, but I wish you'd weigh and compare the two suits, and then choose which seems best. I leave it to your own common sense, answered Dr. Alec, feeling pretty sure he had won. Why, I take this one, of course, Uncle. The other is fashionable, and yes, I must say I think it's pretty, but it's very heavy, and I should have to go around like a walking doll if I wore it. I'm obliged to Auntie, but I'll keep this, please. Rose spoke gently but decidedly, though there was a look of regret when her eye fell on the other suit which Phoebe had brought in, and it was very natural to like to look as other girls did. Aunt Clara sighed, and Uncle Alec smiled and said heartily, "Thank you, dear. Now read this book and you will understand why I ask it of you. Then if you like, I'll give you a new lesson. You asked for one yesterday, and this is more necessary than French or housekeeping." "Oh, what?" And Rose caught up the book which Mrs. Clara had thrown down with a disgusted look. Though Dr. Alec was watching Rose as she counted the vertebrae and waggled a hip joint in its socket with an inquiring expression. An excellent study, for she enjoys it, and I mean to teach her how to manage her nerves so that they won't be a curse to her, as many a woman's become through ignorance and want of thought. To make a mystery or a terror of these things is a mistake, and I mean Rose shall understand and respect her body so well that she won't dare to trifle with it as most women do. And she really likes it? Very much, Auntie. It's all so wonderful and so nicely planned. You can hardly believe what you see. Just think, there are 6 billion air cells in one pair of lungs and 2,000 pores to a square inch of surface. So you see what quantities of air we must have, and what care we should take care of our skin so that all the little doors will open and shut right. And brains, Auntie, you've no idea how curious they are. I haven't got to them yet, but I long to. And Uncle is going to show me a mannequin that you can take to pieces.
A mannequin?
Like the ignorance and want of thought that made her what she was, a nervous, dyspeptic, unhappy old woman. Because she didn't know about her body, and she didn't know how to take care of herself, and she didn't know these things. She had all those bottles and pills and...
Jim,
Auntie, let's
I have
stop
to chew
here.
If it hurts, chew on your
finish the
finger.
chapter.
That's what I do. Or chew on your...
Well, I don't know, but you may be right, Alec. Only I wouldn't carry it too far. Women don't need much of this sort of knowledge and are not fit for it. I couldn't bear to touch that ugly thing, and it gives me the creeps to hear about organs, said Aunt Myra, with a sigh and her hand on her side. Wouldn't it be a comfort to know that your liver was on the right side, Auntie, and not on the left? She probably always said her liver hurt, and she always pointed to the wrong side. Asked Rose with a naughty laugh in her eyes, for she had lately learned that Aunt Myra's liver complaint was not in the proper place. Plagued Dr. Alex's students half out of their lives, but they kept on persistently, and one day something happened which made the other fellows behave themselves forever after. It was a holiday, and Rose, up in her room, thought she heard the voice of her cousins, so she ran down to welcome them, but found no one there. "Never mind, they will be here soon, and then we'll have a frolic," she said to herself, and thinking she had been mistaken, she went into the study to wait. She was lounging over the table looking at a map when an odd noise caught her ear. A gentle tapping somewhere, and following the sound, it seemed to come. There's another piece like that funny piece of that. Oh, there, it fit.
Emily, don't send them around the side.
Okay, these go
Turning
together.
them all short and down.
I'm gonna just shove that
Here's part of a fern.
one. Emily, go work on your own. I'm not working on Fern. There's a fine. I think you should keep looking for the grass.
I've been trying. I haven't found what to do except for that. But oh, here's some.
Some of the colors are so strange that.
I'm just working with total gray down here. It's getting kind of blasé. Mom, here's a piece.
For whatever I see that matches. Emily, what?
Right here. Here's a piece. Can't figure out why.
Notice we don't have a picture of it. We have to do it on our own. I don't know.
Mom, here's purple right here.
Exactly the same.
Find things that you want
I feel like flying. What did you say, Tom? Been around,
Oh, you're on tape?
What?
Yes, you better watch what you say. Gosh.
Okay, you have a menu in front of you, and there are 3 courses in each meal. And on the side of them are different Mexican cities. There's a map over here of an atlas that you can look up what you're eating. You put your name at the bottom, and you choose any of the items on the side, and you put them in each course. That's it.
Okay, we will
Do
have
we do our,
Shuki K.
do we all 3 courses? Do all
Yeah, put all of them down.
So Shuki K.
You want that for your
Osaka.
first course?
What's you?
You have to pick 4 things.
All right there.
Spell it out for me. A-R-N.
JP pan.
Oh, yeah.
Tahiti pan.
I ate the cheese, guys.
And
What else?
Zakikas.
What else?
Yes, you have to. You want like the bottom one?
Okay.
I have my wallet right here.
Go ahead and say it. What did you win?
The best eater.
Basil.
What do we know?
Funny bone.
Most improved mom.
Nah.
Civil War debate, 2nd place, and the Best Behavior Award.
The Civil War debate and the Best Attitude Award.
The Arch Cape Diner Award. Civil War Debate, 1st place. And the Best Effort Award.
The Arch Cape Diner Award, First Assistant Award, and Civil War Debate 1st place.
Okay, give everybody a round of applause.
Yay.